I used to be the person who prayed with faith, yet the bills never stopped arriving. I believed in God, but I felt that abundance was meant for other people. That was until the day I understood it wasn't about deserving, but about understanding the divine language of manifestation. And that is what I want to talk to you about today, because perhaps, just like me, you also believed for a long time that God chooses some to prosper and others to struggle their entire lives. But what if I told you that this very belief is what keeps you trapped in scarcity, that what you're missing isn't faith, but the spiritual comprehension of the divine formula that turns the invisible into reality? Most people pray asking for change, but they continue to vibrate on the same frequency of lack. They ask for light, but they keep focusing on the darkness. And what nobody tells you is that the universe, which is the living expression of God's mind, responds exactly to what you feel and not just to what you say. It took me a long time to grasp this, until one day, while reading the teachings of Emmett Fox, something inside me awakened. He said, the secret isn't in asking God to change the world out there, but in changing the world within us, because that is where all creation begins. In that instant, everything started to make sense. The words of Jesus, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, stopped being just a beautiful verse and became a code of creation. I realized that faith wasn't just believing that God could, but believing that He already has. And when you understand this, something shifts. The doors that seemed closed begin to open, opportunities arise, and you feel the divine presence guiding your steps with almost miraculous precision. But before I continue, I want you to pause and think, how many times have you prayed asking God to take something out of your life? A debt, a problem, a pain, and that very thing seemed to grow even larger. Exactly. It's not because God didn't hear, it's because your focus remained on the problem, and God can only multiply what you place in His hands with gratitude, not with fear. When you understand this spiritual law, you begin to live in a completely different way. You stop asking and start manifesting. And if you want to learn how to apply this in your own life, in a practical, simple, and profoundly transformative way, there is special content waiting at the link in the first pinned comment. It's something that will help you align your mind with the frequency of divine manifestation. This isn't theory, it's spiritual practice that transforms. Now come back to me, because what I am about to reveal next is the turning point. It's when scarcity stops being a condition and becomes a choice. An unconscious one, yes, but still a choice. And only when you become aware of this does the power shift its place. It moves away from fear and returns to you. How many times have you wondered why it seems so hard to prosper, even when you pray, even when you try to do everything right? Why does it seem like the flow of life always pushes you toward struggle, toward effort, toward the almost but not quite? There is a deep spiritual reason for this, and it's hidden in one of the oldest and most ignored truths in the Bible. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. These words are not just sacred poetry. They are a formula, a divine formula. Because the heart, in spiritual language, is not just the physical organ, but the vibrational center of consciousness. It is where the mind and spirit unite. It is where God whispers. It is where manifestation begins. And when you comprehend this, you realize you don't need to seek blessings, because they have already been given. You just need to align yourself to receive them. But how do you align? How do you finally break the cycle of spiritual and material scarcity? How do you break this invisible pattern that makes you believe it's never enough, that the blessing is always for others, that God loves you but seems to take too long to act? These questions, which may be echoing in your soul right now, are the gateway to the next step. And what comes next is the key, because there is a revelation at the end of this message that changes everything. Something that few have understood, not even those who have dedicated their entire lives to faith. And when you hear it, I promise you, It will be as if a light switches on inside you. But before we get there, take a deep breath. Open your heart, because what comes now is the part where you finally understand how God manifests through you and not outside of you. The final revelation of this video is the most powerful of all. It won't just show you how to attract prosperity, but how to become prosperity. Because abundance is not a prize, it is a state of consciousness. And when you awaken to this, you never go back to being the same. When I began to understand that scarcity wasn't a punishment but a reflection of my consciousness, something inside me broke. Because until then, I believed that God chose who would have and who would not, who would win and who would be left behind. But that's not how the divine operates. God makes no distinction between his children. He is the infinite source, and this source flows constantly. The problem is that most people haven't learned how to drink from it. Emmett Fox used to say, "The mind is a magnet." And that's exactly what we are, spiritual magnets. Everything we attract into our lives comes from what we hold in our mind and heart with the most emotional force. If your heart vibrates in fear, guilt, or lack, life will respond on the same frequency. It's not punishment, it's law. The law of manifestation is the spiritual translation of divine justice itself, because God doesn't judge, he reflects. The universe is like a mirror, and the reflection you see is exactly what you are inside. It was then I realized something simple, yet transformative. Praying by asking is different from praying by creating. The first prayer comes from scarcity, the second from certainty. Jesus never taught us to ask desperately, but to declare with faith, as one who knows the Father has already granted it. He said, "When you pray, believe that you have received it." This is not a metaphor, it is spiritual instruction. It is the divine formula of manifestation. But why is it so hard to believe this when the bill is due tomorrow and the money hasn't arrived yet? Because the human mind has learned to trust what it sees more than what it feels. The spiritual, however, operates in reverse. You must feel it before you see it. You must live the miracle on the inside before it manifests on the outside. This is faith in action. It is creative faith. The same faith that moved Jesus, Elijah, Abraham, and all those who learned to align themselves with the mind of God. And here is a point Emmett Fox emphasized greatly. You cannot change the external world until you change the internal world. It sounds simple, but it is one of the most challenging truths in life. Because as long as you are waiting for something to change out there, the job, the people, the circumstances, nothing will move. Life changes when you change the vibration you are emitting. This is how scarcity dissolves, not by force, but by consciousness. And I know you might have tried everything. Maybe you've done prayers, campaigns, novenas. Maybe you've read books on prosperity, watched lectures, repeated affirmations. But nothing seems to last, because what you are seeking is not a method, it's a state of being. Prosperity is not a goal, it is a consequence of being in harmony with the source. And how is this harmony achieved? It begins with surrender, not the surrender of one who gives up, but of one who trusts. When you surrender control, fear loses its power, and without fear, faith flourishes. God doesn't need you to fight to receive, he needs you to allow. The divine flow is constant, but it only flows where there is space, and fear takes up too much space. Often, material scarcity is the reflection of an unresolved spiritual scarcity. It's the deep-seated feeling of unworthiness, of being small before the grandeur of God. But this is an old illusion. The truth is, God doesn't want you to survive. He wants you to overflow. He wants his light to shine through you, and abundance is one of the ways this light expresses itself in the world. When you understand this, everything changes. You stop asking for blessings and start becoming a blessing. You stop trying to control God's timing and start living in his time. Because God's time is not the earth's clock, it is the rhythm of the soul. And in that rhythm, nothing is late, nothing is lacking, nothing is lost. Everything arrives at the exact moment you are ready to receive it. But there is a detail that almost no one talks about. The human mind was not made to manifest alone. It needs the cooperation of the heart. As long as your thought says, "I want to prosper," but your heart feels, "I am afraid of losing," the universe receives a confused signal. It's like trying to tune into two radio stations at the same time. The result is noise, and it is this noise that we call a spiritual blockage. This is why when Jesus said, "If two of you agree on earth," he wasn't just talking about two people, but about the agreement between mind and heart. When both vibrate on the same frequency, the miracle happens. Now think with me. How many times have you prayed asking for a door, but inside you carry the memory of all the doors that closed? How many times do you declare that you trust God, but you live worrying about tomorrow? This internal conflict is what neutralizes the power of manifestation. Because the universe doesn't respond to your words, it responds to your actual vibration. And when you change the vibration, everything realigns. That is exactly what I did. I began to give thanks for that which had not yet manifested, but which I already felt as real. I would wake up and say, "Father, thank you for the abundance that is already flowing to me." Even without seeing, I felt it. Even without having, I believed. And little by little, the signs began to appear. An unexpected invitation, an opportunity, an idea that seemed to come from nowhere, but which, deep down, was God responding to my new frequency. The truth is, the universe always responds. Always. But it responds to who you are, not to what you wish to be. Therefore, the first step to breaking scarcity is not to seek what is missing, but to become the consciousness of abundance. And you only become this when you understand that God is not outside. He is in you, manifesting through your intention, your feeling, and your active faith. Maybe now you're thinking, but what if I can't feel this abundance yet? Then start by imagining. Close your eyes and see life as you want it to be. Feel the joy of already having, the peace of already being in the right place. And do not doubt, not even for a second, that this is real. Because in the spiritual field, everything that is felt with faith already exists. It is only a matter of time until it becomes visible. Remember, God created everything twice, first in the invisible, then in the visible. Just as an architect designs before building, the universe manifests what is projected in the mind and heart. Therefore, if you want to see abundance out there, plant abundance within yourself. Stop repeating, "I don't have. It's difficult. Nothing works out for me." Every word is a seed, and the soil is your spirit. Your speech is prayer. Your emotion is the force that activates the seed. And this is how I discovered what Emmett Fox called the divine formula: thought plus emotion plus faith, manifestation. But it's not a passive faith, it's a living faith. One that acts, that trusts, that declares. A faith that does not negotiate with fear. And perhaps you are feeling now that something inside you is opening up. It is your spirit recognizing the truth. Because deep down, you always knew you were not born to live in lack. You were born to express the fullness of God. And if you have come this far, it is because this message is for you. And if you want to take the next step, to go deeper on the path of divine manifestation, there is special content waiting for you at the link in the first pinned comment. It is a simple but powerful practice that will help you activate this energy of prosperity at all levels of your life. Now imagine what it would be like to live without fear of tomorrow. Imagine waking up with the certainty that the universe is conspiring in your favor because you are vibrating in harmony with God. This is what happens when you break through spiritual scarcity. From then on, material scarcity simply ceases to exist because it was only a reflection. When your mind aligns with the divine consciousness, life stops being a struggle and becomes a flow. Money comes as an expression of your value. Opportunities appear because the energy you emit becomes a beacon. The right people find you. It's not coincidence. It's energetic coherence. And it all begins the moment you stop looking at what is missing and start being grateful for what is. Because gratitude is the highest language of manifestation. It is the proof that you already believe, even without seeing. And when you give thanks genuinely, the universe understands. He is ready. And then the impossible happens. God never wanted you to beg for blessings. He created you to co-create with Him. And this is the divine formula. To think like a child of God, feel like a child of God, act like a child of God. When you do this, heaven moves, and everything that was stuck begins to flow, because the kingdom of God, the one Jesus said is within you, begins to manifest through you. And it is at this point that life changes forever, because when you understand that the power to create is in you, you never again live as a victim. You become the conscious creator of your reality. And this is true prosperity, living in the consciousness that God dwells in you and manifests through every thought, word, and action you emit with faith. In the end, breaking spiritual and material scarcity is not about accumulating, it is about awakening. Awakening to the fact that the divine never left. He was always there, inside your heart, waiting for you to open the door of consciousness and say, "Father, I am ready to live your abundance." And when you say that truly, heaven responds. Not with thunder, but with peace. Not with haste, but with certainty. And everything that once seemed distant begins to take form before your very eyes. Prosperity, my friend, is not something you achieve. It is something you remember you already have. And from the moment you remember this, the impossible ceases to exist. Reaching this point is like crossing a portal, because if you truly listened with an open heart, you are no longer the same person who started this video. Something inside you has moved. Perhaps it was an ancient memory of your own essence, or perhaps it was the gentle touch of God telling you, "Child, I never stopped being here." And that is precisely the point where scarcity begins to disappear, when you feel that God was never distant, that He doesn't need to be convinced to bless you because He already blessed you from the beginning. The divine formula is not a secret hidden somewhere far away. It is in the gospel, between the lines of Jesus' words, in the spiritual laws that govern the universe, and above all, inside you. What Emmett Fox taught, and what the Bible confirms, is that God manifests through human consciousness. This means that when you change your way of thinking, feeling, and reacting to the world, you change what the world gives back to you. And perhaps this is the greatest miracle of all, realizing that the power to create is not in the hands of something outside of you, but within your own soul, because the Spirit of God dwells in you, and where He dwells, there is no lack. You were created in the image and likeness of the Creator, and that means you carry the same power to generate, transform, and multiply. Except that for so long, you were taught this was arrogance, when in fact it is the greatest act of humility, to accept that God wants to express Himself through your life. When you live in the consciousness of scarcity, you close yourself off from this expression. You disconnect from the source. But when you awaken and begin to live in gratitude, trust, and active faith, you reconnect. And it is in this reconnection that everything begins to flourish. Not just financially, but emotionally, spiritually, and even physically. Think of Jesus. He multiplied loaves, healed the sick, and calmed storms, not because He had something we don't, but because He was fully conscious of who He was in God. He lived in perfect unity with the Father, and it is this unity that opens the doors of the impossible. When you understand this, you realize that manifesting is not a technique, it is a communion. It is living in tune with divine love. Spiritual scarcity is fundamentally a forgetting, a forgetting that you are an heir to the kingdom. But now you remember. And when the soul remembers, the universe responds. You no longer need to chase after what is already yours. You just need to position yourself in the right consciousness, the consciousness of abundance, of trust, of surrender. God doesn't want you to just survive. He wants His light to shine through you and for the world to see in your victories a reflection of His love. And when you understand this, prosperity stops being a desire and becomes a testimony. Because when you prosper in consciousness, you uplift everyone and everything around you. You become a channel through which good flows. Remember when I said at the beginning that the final revelation would be the most powerful of all? It is here. The true divine formula to break all scarcity, spiritual and material, is to remember who you are. You are not a human being trying to be spiritual. You are a spiritual being living a human experience. And when you remember this, all illusion of limitation dissolves, because the spirit is unlimited and you are made of that same spirit. Everything you desire, love, prosperity, health, peace, already exists in potential within you. Prayer is not a request for God to give you something. It is the moment you awaken to receive what He has already given you. Faith is not an uncertain hope. It is the certainty that what is divine is already being fulfilled. And abundance is not a prize for the chosen few. It is the natural state of one who remembers their own origin. So, right now, I want to invite you to close your eyes for a few seconds and just feel the presence of God inside you. Feel this life energy, this silent power that has always been there, waiting for you to recognize it. He never abandoned you. He just waited for you to remember. And when you open your eyes, look at the world in a different way. Not as someone who needs to fight to deserve, but as someone who has understood that everything good and perfect comes from God, and that He chose you to manifest it here on earth. From now on, every thought of yours can be a divine seed. Every word can be a living prayer. Every action can be an expression of the Creator's love. And when you live like this, the flow of life begins to carry you. Things happen without effort, paths open without pressure, and peace becomes your natural state. Scarcity has no power over one who remembers their own inner abundance. Poverty cannot reach one who understands that the Father owns everything. And fear disappears when love occupies the center of the heart. So if this message touched you, if something inside you has awakened and wants to continue this path of transformation, there is something very special waiting for you at the link in the first pinned comment. It is an opportunity to deepen this connection with the divine and learn to consciously manifest every day the power that God has already placed inside you. Allow yourself to live this new time, a time when scarcity becomes a memory and abundance your new normal, where prayer ceases to be pleading and transforms into communion, where you stop chasing the blessing and start being the blessing itself. And if this message touched your heart, I ask you, please leave your like and subscribe to the channel. By doing so, you help me bring this word to more people who, just like you, are ready to awaken to the abundance that comes from God. Because in the end, true prosperity is not how much you have, but how much you remember that you are one with the Creator. And whoever lives from this remembrance never again fears lack, because they already live in fullness. Now it's up to you. Open your heart, elevate your thoughts, and declare with faith, Father, I accept your abundance in me. And observe, because starting today, life will begin to respond.